The midnight air hung thick with incense and whispered prayers as candlelight flickered across weathered ancestral tablets. In a small village nestled deep within China's mountainous interior, an extraordinary ceremony was about to unfold that would unite two souls who had never met in life, yet were destined to spend eternity together in death. The elderly matchmaker's hands trembled as she arranged red silk wedding garments on two wooden coffins, her movements deliberate and reverent. Paper money crackled in iron braziers, while relatives murmured ancient blessings, their voices barely audible above the autumn wind that howled through mountain passes like the wails of lonely spirits. This was no ordinary wedding. The bride had died 3 years ago, unmarried and alone, her youthful dreams buried beneath 3 feet of cold earth. The groom had perished just months earlier, a bachelor whose family feared his restless spirit wandered the borderlands between worlds, growing more malevolent with each passing night. Tonight, in a ceremony that would horrify modern sensibilities yet comfort ancient souls, they would be joined in matrimony through a ritual that predates recorded history. What if death wasn't the end of love, but just the beginning? This haunting question has echoed through Chinese culture for over 3 millennia, manifesting in one of the world's most enigmatic practices, Minghun, literally translated as spirit marriage or ghost marriage. Far from being mere curiosity, Minghun represents a profound window into humanity's eternal struggle with mortality, loneliness, and the desperate desire to find meaning beyond the grave. The practice emerges from Chinese philosophical tradition, rooted in the concept of yin and yang, the cosmic forces that govern all existence. According to ancient Chinese cosmology, the universe operates through delicate equilibrium between opposing yet complementary energies. Unmarried spirits existed in perpetual imbalance, yang without yin, or yin without yang, creating dangerous cosmic disruption that rippled through both spiritual and physical realms. This spiritual imbalance posed genuine threat to the living world. Unmarried spirits were thought to become increasingly restless and malevolent as years passed, their loneliness transforming into bitter rage, while isolation bred deep resentment toward those who enjoyed the companionship they were forever denied. These tortured souls were believed capable of inflicting terrible misfortune upon their living relatives, causing mysterious illnesses that defied medical treatment, financial ruin that struck without warning, failed harvests despite favorable weather, and even premature death that claimed family members in their prime. The only solution was to provide what the spirit desperately craved, a companion for the endless journey through eternity's dark corridors. Archaeological evidence suggests Minghun ceremonies date back to the Shang dynasty, 1600 to 1046 BCE, making it one of the oldest continuously practiced rituals in human history. Ancient tomb excavations have revealed elaborate burial sites where unrelated individuals were interred together, their skeletons arranged in eternal embrace, accompanied by ceremonial objects typically found in wedding preparations: jade combs, bronze mirrors, silk fabrics dyed in auspicious colors, and pottery vessels filled with rice wine for their wedding feast in the afterlife. The practice traditionally took 2 distinct forms, each serving different spiritual and social needs within the complex tapestry of Chinese ancestor worship. The most common variant involved marrying 2 deceased individuals, perhaps a young woman who died of fever during harsh winter months and a man killed in border wars. Their families brought together by shared grief and mutual spiritual necessity. These ceremonies often rivaled conventional weddings in elaborateness, complete with traditional red silk garments embroidered with golden dragons and phoenixes, ceremonial tea services performed by living relatives, elaborate feasts where empty chairs awaited the spiritual guests, and the burning of vast quantities of paper money to ensure the couple's comfort and prosperity in the afterlife. Today, despite official prohibition and advance of scientific materialism, ghost marriages continue occurring in remote areas of China, often conducted in secret by families convinced of their necessity. These modern manifestations sometimes take disturbing forms that would have horrified ancient practitioners, yet they spring from the same fundamental human desire to transcend death's finality. The stories you are about to encounter span centuries of Chinese history, revealing extraordinary lengths human beings will go to honor their dead and protect their living. These are not folklore or urban legends, but carefully verified accounts that challenge everything you believe about boundaries between life and death, love and duty, tradition and modernity. Chapter 1. The Coal Miner's Ghost Bride. The autumn morning mist clung to the jagged peaks of Shanxi province as Mrs. Wei clutched the faded photograph of her son, Wei Guohua. 10 years had passed since the cave-in that claimed his life at the Hongyuan coal mine, along with 17 other young men who had descended into the earth's belly that fateful morning and never returned. The government compensation of 300,000 yuan, roughly $50,000, had eased the family's immediate financial burden, but it could never fill the aching void left by their unmarried 26-year-old son. In China's coal mining heartland, death stalks the tunnels with relentless hunger. Shanxi province produces nearly a quarter of China's coal, its black veins running beneath mountains that have claimed countless lives over generations. Mine collapses, gas explosions, and equipment failures create a steady stream of young widows and grieving parents, each tragedy rippling through tight-knit communities where survival often depends on the dangerous work that feeds the nation's industrial appetite. For families like the Weis, losing an unmarried son represents more than personal tragedy. It signifies a spiritual crisis that threatens to haunt their lineage for generations uncounted. Wei Guohua had been diligently saving money to marry his childhood sweetheart when the mine claimed his life. His modest bank account containing 85,000 yuan that was meant to fund their wedding banquet and purchase their first apartment together. His girlfriend had waited faithfully for 2 years after his death, lighting incense at his grave every week and maintaining his shrine with fresh offerings, before finally accepting another man's proposal, a betrayal that his family believed had sent Wei Guohua's spirit into paroxysms of jealous rage. Now, a decade later, his mother still burned incense at his shrine each morning and evening, whispering tearful apologies to his spirit for failing to find him a wife and begging forgiveness for the family's mounting misfortunes. The local fortune teller, an elderly woman who claimed direct communication with the spirit world, had warned that Wei Guohua's restless soul was growing increasingly agitated with each passing season, manifesting in a devastating series of calamities that had befallen the family. 3 consecutive years of crop failures despite optimal weather conditions, unexpected illnesses that struck family members with mysterious symptoms, and financial setbacks that seemed to multiply with supernatural persistence, equipment breakdowns, failed business ventures, and medical bills that consumed their savings. The solution came through whispered conversations in tea houses and coded messages passed between trusted intermediaries. A ghost bride could be arranged, they were told, though the price had risen dramatically in recent years. What once cost a few thousand yuan now commanded sums that made families mortgage their homes and liquidate their savings. The reason for this inflation lay in the dark underbelly of China's modernization, a criminal enterprise that had transformed ancient spiritual practices into a macabre marketplace. Yang Dongyan understood this lucrative market better than most. The 43-year-old farmer from neighboring Henan province had discovered that fresh female corpses could fetch astronomical sums on the black market, up to 200,000 yuan for prime specimens, depending on age, physical appearance, and circumstances of death. In 2007, driven by mounting debts from failed agricultural investments and his own family's desperate poverty, his entrepreneurial instincts took a horrifying turn when he began systematically murdering young women specifically to sell their bodies as ghost brides. His victims, typically migrant workers seeking employment in unfamiliar cities, were lured with promises of legitimate work or companionship, never suspecting they were walking into carefully planned business transactions that valued their corpses more than their lives. Yang would befriend these vulnerable women over weeks or months, gaining their trust before striking with calculated precision, usually poison administered in shared meals, leaving bodies unmarked and suitable for ceremonial presentation. He stored the corpses in specially constructed underground chambers, sometimes for months, waiting for optimal market conditions before completing sales to desperate families. Yang's operation represented just one node in a sprawling network that had metastasized across rural China. In 2014, police in Shandong province arrested 11 men involved in an organized grave-robbing enterprise that specifically targeted young women's graves. The criminals had developed sophisticated methods for identifying suitable victims, studying obituaries and monitoring funeral processions to locate burial sites of unmarried women. They operated under cover of darkness, working with medical precision to extract bodies while leaving graves appearing undisturbed. The market dynamics governing this ghoulish trade follow cold economic logic. Premium prices are paid for corpses of women who died young and unmarried, with additional value placed on physical beauty, family background, and circumstances of death. Bodies of accident victims, or those who died of natural causes, command higher prices than suicide victims, who are considered spiritually compromised. Some criminal organizations even employ plastic surgeons to enhance corpses' appearance, applying makeup and performing minor cosmetic procedures to increase market value. Mrs. Wei learned these disturbing details gradually as negotiations for her son's ghost marriage progressed through intermediaries who spoke in euphemisms and coded language. The woman they had found for Wei Guohe was named Yue, at least. That was the name given to her posthumously. Her actual identity remained shrouded in mystery, though the broker assured them she had been a virtuous young woman who died unexpectedly in her 20s. The price, 80,000 yuan, nearly 2 years' income for the average rural family. The ceremony itself unfolded on a moonless night in November, 10 years and 3 months after Wei Guohua's death. Traditional elements were carefully adapted for the deceased participants by a ritual master who specialized in such otherworldly unions. Red silk wedding garments, embroidered with golden phoenixes and dragons symbolizing eternal love, were draped over the bones that had been carefully arranged in human form upon ceremonial burial beds. Intricate paper, money denominations, and luxury goods paper televisions, automobiles, and houses were methodically burned to ensure the couple's comfort and prosperity in the afterlife. The bones were transferred under a silk canopy held by 4 family members, as daylight was considered harmful to dead souls, making their transition between worlds. Incense burned continuously throughout the night, creating thick aromatic clouds that participants believed would carry their prayers and blessings to the spirit realm. A traditional wedding feast was laid out with empty chairs for the bride and groom, their spirit tablets positioned to witness the ceremony, while family members toasted their eternal union with rice wine. Most haunting was the empty chair placed beside Wei Guohua's memorial tablet seat, where Yue's family would have sat if anyone knew who she really was or mourned her disappearance. The ceremony proceeded with all the reverence of a traditional wedding, yet underneath the familiar rituals lay an uncomfortable truth. This union had been made possible by crimes that would have horrified the ancient creators of ghost marriage traditions. The scale of this modern corpse trade becomes clearer through police statistics that likely represent only discovered cases. In 2015 alone, 14 female bodies were reported stolen from a single village in Shanxi province. The thieves struck with such frequency that some families began hiring private security to guard fresh graves, while others resorted to concrete burial vaults that would deter all but the most determined criminals. These stark realities reveal how economic desperation and spiritual belief have combined to create a perfect storm of exploitation. Poor families, desperate to honor their dead sons and protect their living relatives from spiritual retribution, find themselves funding criminal enterprises that prey upon society's most vulnerable members. Young women disappear into unmarked graves, their identities erased and their stories untold, reduced to commodities in a marketplace that treats human remains as wedding merchandise. The case of Wei Guohua and his mysterious bride Yue illuminates the tragic collision between ancient traditions and modern criminality. What began 3 millennia ago as a sacred ritual designed to bring peace to restless spirits has evolved into something far darker, a shadow economy that profits from grief, superstition, and the eternal human refusal to accept death's finality. Chapter 2. The Living Burial. The thumping from inside the coffin began just as the first shovelful of earth hit the wooden lid. Dull, rhythmic impacts that made the burial party freeze in horror as they realized their mistake. In Gansu province, 2016, what was meant to be a ghost marriage ceremony had become something far more nightmarish: the attempted live burial of a woman with intellectual disabilities, sedated but not dead, awakening to find herself trapped in a coffin 6 feet underground. The woman's muffled screams and desperate clawing at the coffin walls would haunt investigators for years. She had been selected specifically for her vulnerability, her cognitive disabilities, making her an easy target for criminals who viewed her as offering less resistance and being perceived as less human by potential buyers. The sedatives administered to simulate death had worn off at the worst possible moment, transforming what the perpetrators intended as a quiet business transaction into a scene from humanity's darkest nightmares. This case represents the absolute nadir of how ancient spiritual practices have devolved into predatory exploitation, but it was far from isolated. The targeting of vulnerable individuals, those with mental disabilities, the homeless, isolated elderly women, has become a cornerstone of the modern ghost bride trade. These victims are chosen not for their spiritual suitability, but for their societal invisibility, people whose disappearances are unlikely to trigger investigations or media attention. The theft of cremated remains added another dimension of horror to the trade. In 2021, the ashes of Luo Xiao Mao Maozi, a popular live streamer whose sudden death had shocked her online following, vanished from a Shandong funeral home. The investigating worker had stolen her cremated remains to sell as a ghost bride, reducing a woman who had entertained thousands to a commodity worth 50,000 yuan. Her digital afterlife, preserved in countless videos and social media posts, stood in stark contrast to her physical remains being hawked to the highest bidder. Even more disturbing are the living-to-dead marriages that continue to occur in remote rural areas. These ceremonies involve living women being married to deceased men in rituals that blur the line between spiritual practice and psychological torture. The tradition dictates that upon a fiancé's death, his bride could still proceed with the wedding, using a white cockerel to represent the deceased groom during the ceremony. The live bird, its eyes covered with red cloth and its legs bound with silk ribbons, serves as a grotesque proxy for the dead man's spirit. The living bride must take vows of eternal celibacy, immediately move in with the deceased's family, and participate in daily funeral rituals honoring her dead husband. She becomes a living widow, condemned to spend her life serving the memory of a corpse. In 2008, an earthquake survivor in Sichuan province made headlines when she publicly requested donations to fund a ghost marriage to her boyfriend who had died in the disaster, stating she could not bear the thought of him being lonely in the afterlife. The economics driving these horrors have reached staggering proportions. A ghost wedding broker interviewed in 2011 revealed the dramatic inflation in corpse prices. A female corpse can fetch 130,000 yuan now. Just a few years ago, it was only 200 yuan. This thousand-fold increase has created powerful incentives for criminal behavior, with deals now being sealed at hospitals immediately after women die, funeral home workers paid to redirect bodies, and families pressured to sell their daughters' remains. Chapter 3. The Commodification of Death. In one particularly chilling 2012 case from Shaanxi province, a family sold their deceased daughter's body for 35,000 yuan to pay for medical bills, only to discover that grave robbers had immediately resold the corpse for 30,000 yuan to another family seeking a ghost bride. The young woman's remains had become a commodity traded multiple times, her identity and dignity stripped away with each transaction. The practice persists across rural areas of Shaanxi, Henan, Hebei, and Guangdong provinces, where government efforts to eliminate what officials term feudal superstition have been largely ineffective. Local authorities often look the other way, understanding that for many families, ghost marriages serve as a form of bereavement therapy, a way to process grief and maintain connection with the dead. These ceremonies are conducted with all the pageantry of traditional weddings, complete with banquets, entertainment, and elaborate family gatherings that provide social structure around collective mourning. The psychological reality underlying these practices reveals their true function as ancient bereavement therapy. Families report dreams in which deceased relatives appear to arrange their own marriages, providing spiritual justification for what amounts to elaborate grief counseling rituals. The belief that lonely ghosts might take family members to their world for company creates genuine terror among the living, who view ghost marriages as protection against supernatural kidnapping. Modern practitioners speak of temperature drops in homes where unmarried dead are honored, of objects moving without explanation, of unexplained illnesses befalling family members. Whether these phenomena are real or imagined matters less than their psychological impact on grieving families desperate for connection with lost loved ones. The ghost marriage provides closure, transforming a malevolent haunting into a benevolent presence that watches over the living. Yet beneath this psychological comfort lies an uncomfortable truth about the commodification of human remains and the exploitation of society's most vulnerable members. The thin line between love and obsession, between honoring the dead and protecting the living, has been crossed so many times that it no longer exists. Ancient traditions meant to bring peace to both the living and dead have evolved into predatory enterprises that profit from grief and thrive on desperation. The persistence of these practices in China's modernizing society reveals something profound about humanity's relationship with mortality. Despite technological advancement and scientific education, the fundamental human refusal to accept death's finality remains unchanged. Love, it seems, recognizes no boundaries, not even the boundary between life and death. In gleaming modern cities where skyscrapers pierce clouds and bullet trains traverse vast distances in hours, ancient fears still whisper in the darkness of night. Urban families, educated and prosperous, find themselves consulting fortune tellers when unexplained misfortunes befall their households, wondering if neglected ancestors demand attention from beyond the grave. The commodification of death through ghost marriages represents a uniquely modern perversion of ancient wisdom, where sacred rituals become criminal enterprises and spiritual needs transform into market opportunities. Yet perhaps this corruption reveals an essential truth about human nature. Our desperate need for connection transcends even death itself, making us vulnerable to exploitation by those who would prey upon our deepest fears and most profound love. In examining these disturbing cases, we confront haunting questions about the nature of love itself. If love truly conquers all, what happens when death tries to claim that victory? How far should devotion extend beyond the grave? And at what point does love become so consuming that it devours the very humanity it claims to honor? Should we view these practices as evidence of humanity's beautiful refusal to surrender to death's finality, or as cautionary tales about how grief and superstition can corrupt even our noblest impulses? In the shadow world of ghost marriages, these questions find their most terrifying answers, written in bone and sealed with blood, answers that reveal both the heights of human devotion and the depths of human depravity, forever intertwined in rituals that bridge the impossible gap between life and death.